Israel is now facing the most significant criticism since the beginning of IDF operations in the Gaza region. The world is unified in condemnation of the Israeli airstrike that claimed the lives of 7 aid workers in the Gaza Strip, 6 of whom were international volunteers. A multitude of nations, including the US, UK, UN, China, Australia, Spain, France, Cyprus, and many others, have denounced the attack, placing Israel and its military actions under scrutiny. Notably, Israel's closest ally, the United States, is leading the global condemnation. US President Joe Biden expressed his profound dismay, stating that he is outraged and heartbroken. In his statement, Joe Biden criticized Israel for failing to adequately protect aid workers and emphasized the urgent need for Israel to conduct a thorough investigation into the incident. He further asserted that Israel must coordinate its military operations against Hamas with humanitarian efforts to prevent civilian casualties. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken hailed the slain aid workers as heroes and underscored the broader challenges faced in providing aid to Gaza.
The victims of yesterday's strike join a record number of humanitarian workers who have been killed in this particular conflict. These people are heroes. They run into the fire, not away from it. They show the best of what humanity has to offer when the going really gets tough. They have to be protected.
This incident is emblematic of a larger problem and evidence of why distribution of aid in Gaza has been so challenging. But beyond the strike, what is clear is that the IDF must do much more to improve deconfliction processes so that civilians and humanitarian aid workers are protected.
China and France also voiced their criticism of Israel's actions. France condemned the strike firmly, while China urged Israel to refrain from targeting civilians who are afforded special protection under the Geneva Conventions.
Allow me to begin by expressing our firm condemnation of the Israeli strike that led to the deaths of 7 aid workers from the NGO World Central Kitchen. The protection of humanitarian personnel is a moral and legal imperative to which everyone must adhere. Civilians must not be targets of the attacks, and the safety of international aid workers must not be threatened. We urge all parties concerned, especially Israel, to earnestly implement UN Security Council Resolution 2728 to ensure the safety of civilians and civilian facilities, such as hospitals, which are under special protection by the Geneva Conventions, so as to prevent an even worse humanitarian disaster in Gaza.
Cyprus's President Nikos Christodoulidis and UK's Prime Minister expressed shock and sadness over the incident, urging Israel to conduct a thorough investigation and intensify efforts to safeguard civilians and aid workers.
I'm shocked and saddened to hear the reported deaths of aid workers in Gaza. They're doing fantastic work bringing alleviation to the suffering that many are experiencing in Gaza. They should be praised and commended for what they're doing. They need to be allowed to do that work unhindered, and it's incumbent on Israel to make sure that they can do that.
I express our sincere condolences to WCK and the countries who lost their citizens, and we call for an immediate and complete investigation of this sad incident. And the tragic events of last night prove once again that this is not a regional crisis of limited concern or impact.
In a departure from the tone of other world leaders, Spain and Australia expressed anger towards Israel over the incident. Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese expressed outrage at the death of an Australian aid worker in the Israeli airstrike, emphasizing that Australia has conveyed its indignation to Benjamin Netanyahu.
I expressed Australia's anger and concern at the death of Zomi Francom. Zomi was an Australian aid worker working for the World Central Kitchen. I conveyed to Prime Minister Netanyahu in very clear terms that Australians were outraged by this death, by this tragedy, of this fine Australian.
Wartime does not obviate responsibility for observing international humanitarian law, including the protection of aid workers, and that the Australian government, on behalf of the Australian people and on behalf of Zomi Francom, expects full accountability.
Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez demanded clarification from the Israeli government regarding the circumstances of what he termed a brutal attack.
They died while doing what this NGO has been dedicated to for years, and that is feeding people in the midst of so much devastation. I hope and demand that the Israeli government clarify as soon as possible the circumstances of this brutal attack that has taken the lives of 7 aid workers who were doing nothing but helping.
The UN condemned the strike and cautioned that such incidents are symptomatic of the conduct of the ongoing conflict.
The multiplicity of such events is the inevitable result of the way this war is currently being conducted. We reaffirm yet again the need for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. The risks to humanitarian workers have been there for months. This is just a very clear and illustrative example of the challenges, the deadly challenges that humanitarian workers face every day in Gaza, be they internationals or, as most of them are, Palestinians.
WHO questioned why the volunteers were targeted while traveling in a convoy, clearly identified as belonging to World Central Kitchen.
This was an agreed mission with this team. It was deconflicted. Deconflicted means both sides know they're coming, both sides have agreed. The car was well marked. It was very clear it was World Central Kitchen. Now, this is happening, and remember, hundreds of healthcare workers have been killed while doing their job, ambulance drivers, and of course, thousands of civilians, more than 13,000 of them children.
In response to mounting international pressure, Benjamin Netanyahu and the IDF have launched a firefighting effort to address the incident. In a series of video statements led by Prime Minister Netanyahu himself, Israel has explained the circumstances of the unintended strikes, expressed sorrow over the deaths of aid workers, referred to it as a case of misidentification, and provided an update on the investigation.
Unfortunately, in the last day, there was a tragic incident of an unintended strike of our forces on innocent people in the Gaza Strip. This happens in war. We are checking this thoroughly. We are in touch with the governments, and we will do everything for this not to happen again.
I just spoke to WCK founder, Chef Jose Anders, and expressed the deepest condolences of Israel Defense Forces to the families and the entire World Central Kitchen family. We also express sincere sorrow to our allied nations who have been doing and continue to do so much to assist those in need.
I want to be very clear. The strike was not carried out with the intention of harming WCK aid workers. It was a mistake that followed a misidentification at night during a war in a very complex conditions. It shouldn't have happened.
The global backlash against Israel comes at a time when the nation is increasingly isolated on the world stage, further straining its relationships with key allies. Benjamin Netanyahu now faces the risk of alienating critical allies at a juncture when their support is most needed.